Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and joining me today is someone whose life and work sits at the intersection of presence, purpose, and compassion. Jessica Smith has spent the past 2 decades immersed in the world of mindfulness and awareness-based meditation, guided by well-known leaders like Ram Dass, Sharon Salzberg, Jack Kornfield, and her current mentor, Michael Singer, the author of The Untethered Soul. Jessica now shares what she's learned with others through community groups, yoga studios, corporate events, and even classrooms full of children. But her story doesn't stop there. Jessica is also a well-known voice in the world of dementia, advocacy, and caregiving, all of it. And she's been caregiving to her own mother for over a decade. Drawing on her own personal experience and the pillars of mindfulness, she helps other caregivers find moments of peace, joy, and meaningful connection in the midst of some of life's most challenging circumstances. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Marianne. And I appreciate your opening there about the intersection of, can't quite remember what you said, but compassion. And that summed it up so well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it really is an intersection of all of those things, presence, purpose, and compassion.
I feel like you get me.
Well, we'll see, but I think so. I want to start by just backing up about 10 years and sharing the story of your mom's diagnosis and how that led you into being a caregiver, one of the primary caregivers for your mom. Can you set the stage and show us how that unfolded?
Sure. Yeah, it just felt like a very natural unfolding. I'm the oldest daughter of 3 girls. I've always been a leader in all avenues of my life. And as soon as I noticed my mom starting to exhibit some behaviors that really weren't like her, my spidey senses, if you will, kind of went off. And I started really honing in my awareness on these behaviors and on her changing attitudes. I started noticing someone who was once extraordinarily organized, couldn't really handle one task at a time any longer. I noticed she was getting lost going to familiar places. I noticed that she was telling me stories from her past that I had never heard about before, but I loved them. But I started noticing some repetitive nature to those stories. And so, I went to her about this. But my mom was never really open to help. My mom was a very independent person, as I'm sure many of us women can relate to. And, she wasn't really willing to see a doctor. She kind of, was able to sort of mask a lot of these behaviors to other people. And then I started talking to other family members, got a lot of resistance for about a year from everyone. But, as a daughter, your mom. And I just wasn't going to give up. And eventually we got her and my stepdad to go to a neurologist, and they received the Alzheimer's diagnosis. And that was when she was only 60 years old.
So young.
I'm sorry, 61. And I mean, here's my mom, a very vibrant person. And here are us, we knew nothing of dementia. We don't have dementia in the family. I've never had any other relatives with it or anyone in my life that I knew of. And, just like so many people, I just thought, well, I guess she's not going to remember who I am at some point. That's like literally all I knew. So we started the journey from there once they got that diagnosis, which I'm very grateful we finally received.
You got it early, but I want to stop back for a second
Sure.
to the point you said about your family and you had to kind of convince some people.
Resistance.
You alluded to something there. Yeah. That's been my experience too, that one of the trickiest things to navigate is getting everybody on the same page.
Yes.
And having people show up Well, wanting people to show up in a way that they don't necessarily show up. So some of those things can be super tricky. Talk to me a little bit about what that was like for you and how did you get people on the same page?
That's a very interesting question because I feel like not only was my focus on my mom then, but looking back, that was the beginning of a very long journey for myself as well. Myself and my siblings, myself and my stepdad. You know, I was so focused at that time on my mom, but now 11 years later, looking back, I'm like, wow, I feel like I was a different person back then because I mean, I straight up used like brute force back then. I was very forceful, you know, as I alluded to, I was, you know, I've always been in leadership positions. I've always just been that person that handles things. And, you know, like my mom, I thought I could handle things by kind of barreling through and being like, this is what's going on. And then I quickly realized that's not going to work with everybody. Not only because, you know, people don't want to face these uncomfortable things, but it's also just because, you know, facing the discomfort of my mom's diagnosis forced us all to just face some things within ourselves. And that can be a very scary place for folks. And so looking back, that's what I see now. But in the moment, what I really was experiencing was, why doesn't anyone believe me? Like, you know, I know this is what's going on. And of course, my sisters were the first to come on board with me. I think my stepdad was probably, and he will agree with me on this, the last to sort of agree. Like, yeah, there is something going on. But I would say with my sisters, it took me a very long time to understand that each one of us have a different relationship with my mom.
Yes.
And my mom is a different person to each person in her life, really. I mean, that's just the nature of being a human being. And so looking, you know, that time period, and for probably, quite frankly, 8 to 9 years later, I felt disappointment in how people were showing up. Not understand, really just seeing everything from my perspective. Nothing from anyone else's. And I did get a little high and mighty about it. I really did. And I was right in terms of mom's diagnosis, but if I had to do it all over again now, I would be much softer in understanding everyone else's perspective in the situation.
Well, I like to think that we all do the best we can with what we know at the time, right? That famous quote from Maya Angelou. But when we know better, we do better. And now you do. You can't kill yourself for something you didn't know back then. But I think what you said is worth kind of calling out because people really need to get it, that we all have our own experiences and our own relationships. Two people can grow up in the exact same household with the exact same parents, with the exact same rules, and they still are going to experience it differently because we bring ourselves to it and we're different. So it changes the dynamic. And I think that's often hard to understand. And so many of us do what you did. So many of us look at it and don't understand why people aren't looking at it through your lens and why it doesn't feel the same way. And I think it's important for people to realize what you said. It's different for everybody. And everybody also has different capacity to handle things. So I think that plays into it as well.
And that's so true because, you know, Michael Singer, one of my teachers, talks a lot about, man is the sum of his learned experiences. And that is so true. Our brains are like computers, and our responses and reactions are merely based on these past experiences that we've had. And so my family, they are merely basing their reactions and responses on that and on their realm of knowledge, as was I. And I feel like back then, some of my arrogance with the family members was, I was still very spiritual back then. I was still on my journey, and I was practicing yoga and meditation daily. I was, studying some sacred text every day. And I almost hid behind a guise of well, I know more than you in this arena. So I'm absolutely right in this. And I think part of, definitely my spiritual journey, but many people, is to realize I don't know so much, do I? There's a lot that I don't know. And I feel like that is such a key aspect to spirituality that I've gained knowledge of over the past decade. And, when I look back on those times, definitely not being hard on myself, but I'm giving myself a perspective of growth and, for the next thing that comes up in life where, I'm not going to be an expert right away. And so I'm going to grow into it and that's okay.
Yeah.
Just like you said.
I love that. I love that. I want to talk a little bit about the term distant caregiver, because I have to admit, when I first heard it, and I first heard that you were a distant caregiver, my default thought, I'm going to be totally authentic, was transparent here, was that has to be less taxing than somebody that's there and dealing with it all the time. But then I really, I started researching, I started listening, and I started kind of digging in, and I was like, but that's not really true. But I'm assuming a lot of people go to that default. Do you get that?
Oh, yeah. I went there with myself. Just even like being online, starting my Instagram account. And I don't have millions of followers, but I have almost 50,000. And I can tell you in that journey, as that community has grown, I struggled with that. Am I a phony? Mm-hmm. Am I fake? Like what I'm calling myself a caregiver, but I'm not in the house with my mom 24/7 all the time. And I really had to explore what it meant to give care, right? Yeah. And when we're giving care, what are we giving? We're giving our energy, our time, our attention. And when I tell you, Marianne, my mom and my stepdad are on my mind all of the time, to the point where I have to be very aware to not give them all of myself. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be in person to do that. Now, I do care in person. And just like the past month, she was with me. We were together almost the entire month of March. And that's its own thing. And what I have found on this journey and watching other beautiful caregivers online and in their situations, whether it's in person, long distance, we're all just giving our energy. We're all just giving bits of ourselves. So I don't think it's fair to compare, and that's what I finally had to come to when I was comparing myself all the time. And one person's situation isn't better or worse than another. And I have had people reach out to tell me that I'm not really a caregiver before. I've had people, oh, that's fine. That's just being online. But if you're listening to this, please be nice to people online. It's hard putting yourself out there. But, I'm doing it by choice. And I know everyone's reacting from their own stuff. When someone's reacting like that, they're merely expressing their own pain. And so I really try now to not take those comments personally. But all of us that are caring for people in our lives, we're all worthy. There's no caregiver Olympics.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I went through that myself,
That's totally
I think that's
fair.
a common thought.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think it is. But I hope we can change the thought a little bit through this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And I think one of the things that many of us face in a situation like this or other difficult situations is coming to terms with enough being enough.
Yes.
And so when I thought about you being a distant caregiver, I thought about, well, that probably adds some additional pressure, some additional layers of, I'm not showing up in the way I should show up. I'm not there as much as I should be there. I should probably move or she should move, like all the things. Mm-hmm. That's probably some of the stuff you went through. So if so, how did you come to terms with enough is enough? Because I think that's a challenge for many of us.
You're a very intuitive person, Marianne. That's exactly what I went through. Am I doing enough? Am I giving enough? I need to give more. I mean, even now in this phase, well, I'll back up. In 2020, my husband and I bought our first home with the thought in mind that my stepdad and mom would move up. That still has not happened. And, even then, everything was focused on, are we doing enough? Okay, well, let's talk to them about maybe moving in. We felt like it was going to happen at the time. Let's buy this house that has the space for them, And then over the past 5 years, that hasn't unfolded. And I have, made a pact with myself. I'm going to go down there at least once a month, sometimes once every 3 weeks, or my mom comes up here. And I have really stuck to that. But there have been months or times where I have had to pause and really question that motivation. Like, what am I even doing right now? Why am I even putting this immense pressure on myself when my mom is safe? She's okay right now. My stepdad is okay. I also have a life to tend to. Like, I also have my own day job, which I travel a lot for. I have other volunteer responsibilities. I have to take care of my health. I have a husband to love. I have pets to tend to. And I know so many people have so much more going on, but that's my little world. And I just had to catch myself every once in a while and say, why are you doing this? What is the point of all of this? Okay, it's to help mom. All right, well, is she okay? She's okay. Can I not call her back in this moment so that I can tend to this work email? Yes, it's okay. And it really, at the beginning, took some time with me really trying to sort of talk myself off that ledge.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a really common thing that can happen in caregiving situations is you accidentally become a martyr.
Yes.
And I think that is like such a thing, a common thing. And sometimes that person just rolls with that unconsciously.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you catch yourself. I started catching myself. Then something that really helped me with that was just expressing these concerns of not doing enough to the people closest to me. You know, I know it can feel like really lonely being in these caregiving situations, long distance or otherwise, but I would tell my best friends and my husband, you know, I'm just not doing enough, you know, and having that mirror of them and them like reminding me of everything that I am doing. You know, just like everything in life, we tend to so focus on the negative. What's that one little thing I didn't do? Not the 50 million other things
100%.
that I did do,
Yeah.
you know? And so having them kind of reflect that back to me and reassure me was really, really helpful. But ultimately, I had to get there myself because they can tell me that all day long, but, you know, I'm with myself 24/7 and, you know, I have to believe it.
Yeah. That's a hard one, I think.
It just took some time, you know?
I'm curious how it's been 11 years now.
Mm-hmm.
How has your relationship with your mom evolved over that time? I'm guessing that she's lost some of her faculties. She's not as aware. Is that true? Like,
yeah.
And how has that impacted the relationship?
I gotta tell you, I'm the closest with my mom that I've ever been in my entire life. It's like the most beautiful thing.
I gotta tell you, that shocks me. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear that, but I want to know more because that does shock me.
You know, I'm so grateful that I have leaned in these past 10 and 11 years because, you know, I've gotten to know my mom on this extraordinarily deep level that I never would have otherwise. From the first, I would say 6 to 7 years, you know, when a lot of the changes were just mind-based. They weren't as physical. You know, she started having issues caring for herself, like cooking for herself, taking herself places. And then eventually personal care tasks became difficult. But in that time period, it was really cool to watch some of this stress that my mom had lived with her entire life sort of dissipate. And it just kind of opened this door for a bigger friendship with her. And like she and I had I'm not lying here. She and I had some of the best times of my life with her. I'm going to cry. Some of the best times of my life with her, because of dementia, not despite of it, you know?
Wow.
And I think it's so important to recognize that because, I mean, my mom and I were pretty close in my adult years. We had a very good friendship, you know, not so much when I was a bratty know-it-all teenager, but after college and stuff, we became pretty close. But this closeness was on a whole other level. And I think part of that was seeing how much of her is in me. Just our personalities, our laugh, you know, if we had a mole on the same place. And when I started providing her with some personal care, the closeness, the bond that's formed, I'm sure if you have kids or parents out there know, you know, when you're changing someone's diaper, when they are relying on you for food, when they are relying on you to take them someplace, and there's that intimacy, that just makes, I don't know, that just makes for a greater bond. And, you know, sure, my mom has lost a lot of her faculties at this point. And, you know, she's lost a lot of vocabulary. She can't say many words anymore. We also got a Lewy body dementia diagnosis middle of last year. And so that's affecting her mobility and making her very rigid and doing all these things. But I got to tell you, I called her last night on my way to yoga and we had a great conversation. Was the context there? No, not necessarily. We talked about some of her current favorite things. Little kids, blue shirts. I mean, she has this very small vocabulary that she utilizes, and I know the inflections to know how she's feeling, and I merely just meet those inflections. And I'll be like, you got the new shirts? And she'll be like, I got the new shirts. And I'm like, were they blue? And she's like, they were blue. And so I just have found this way to work within the confines of her like dementia life. And instead of resisting it. And I think that is really what has like glued us together, That's
what was popping through my head, was that you're meeting her where she is.
Totally.
And I was going to ask you how, what the best ways were that you've connected to keep that connection alive. But actually, what I think is happening is you're creating new connections in a different way.
Totally.
From listening to you, you're not trying to stay connected to the mom of 11 years ago. You're creating new connections with mom in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of this as it transitions. So that's beautiful and probably awfully difficult. So I commend you, because I'm recognizing in my brain as you're saying this, how difficult that must really be. But good for you for being able to do that.
Thank you. But I think it has become very easy for me because I have realized that we are all changing. Like, it's just very apparent with someone who is living with dementia.
Yeah.
And as a person in their life, you are like hyper focused on the changes, but you are changing. I am changing. My husband's changing. Everybody that I know in my community is changing.
Yeah.
And we have to adjust all the time. And this experience with my mom and dementia is only making me better at that. It's only giving me a wider view that things don't have to be this certain way for me to have a relationship with someone. They don't have to meet these like arbitrary requirements in my mind. Like, why do I have to have like an quote unquote intelligent conversation with my mom? We can sling words back and forth and have no logical meaning to anyone else, but we're just having fun.
Yeah.
I mean, why not be like that? It's fun. That is something that definitely came pretty natural to me on this journey. And I think part of what prepared me for that was my theater background. So I did a lot of like work on the stage, and I have always been a big actress. That's just me. That's who I am. And I think that sort of like being able to be, improvise with my mom, has really, I'm using those tools that I used in high school and college.
Step into a role,
cool.
Step into any role that you need to. That is really cool. Yes. I wouldn't have thought of that. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about, you said you're very grateful for this time you've had and for this experience. The diagnosis has led you to this experience. How do you find a way to hold space for being grateful, but yet you must have grief in there as well. Like, you lost the mom you knew and probably planned for the next 40 years. So how do those two things exist for you? Well,
I think I have realized through my mindfulness work that, gratitude can't be conditional, and when you think about when we most often hear people saying grateful, like, I'm grateful for this, it's because they got what they wanted or they didn't get what they didn't want. Okay. And when we live our lives in that way, it's like we're setting ourselves up for disappointment and hurt. We're setting ourselves up for suffering, because if you're only grateful when you get it one way, if you're only grateful when you're going on vacation, not when you're coming home, you got an issue there. Because really, what I'm feeling these days is, I'm grateful to be alive, even though my mom is dying. I am grateful to be experiencing all of these beautiful things in life while I'm having all of this difficult discourse with my stepdad. I just feel like there's no need to separate the two, and I can hold it all at once. And I can be grateful for learning to be uncomfortable. And that's something that this journey has helped me see so clearly. And why that's good is because life is full of discomfort. I'm never going to be able to like make everything outside of me fit this bill for the way I need it to be. Life is unfolding without me. I'm just seeing my little view of it, this little space. There's like billions of other things happening right now on the planet. And so I'm never going to be able to like make it match what needs to happen to be okay. So I've just kind of moved into the zone of trying to be grateful for all of it, because I feel like it all has value. And so I'm grateful to learn how to be with my grief right now. And I know somebody's probably rolling their eyes, and that's fine. Like I'm used to that feedback, but it's true. This is like who I am and how I am now. And it's just, I just think everything that has been brought in front of me, everything that's happening with my mom, I can be grateful for that. I can be grateful that I get to be in touch with like this deep sadness. It's not sadness that my mom has changed. It's sadness of her suffering.
Yeah.
But I do think it's possible to be grateful for these things.
I think, yes, there will be people that roll their eyes because all kinds of people are people, right?
Right, of course.
But the thing that strikes me is your background, the work you've been doing for years. It's really set you up for having this mental capacity to sort of handle this and navigate this in the way you are. And I was going to ask you if there was one thing that you could point to, one thing, all those trainings and all of the mindfulness work that you do, what does it give you when you're operating day to day as a caregiver? And I still will ask you that question. But the thing that jumped out at me is it's all of it. It's all of it. Your mindset, everything you're saying to me, every reply in my head, I'm saying, this is because she already had done so much work.
It is. But like, it's funny. It's like, I logically knew all of these concepts. And because of this dementia journey, I went from logically knowing these things to fully embodying them.
Yes.
Now. It's just a different, and like even my husband, Ken, talks a lot. Like lately, he's been giving me a lot of feedback that I'm not reacting to just everyday ho-hum things the way that I used to. That would make him tense up, like if I was making a smoothie earlier and I opened the bag and like a bunch of the blueberries fell out and I just said, oh, fart. Whereas a few years ago, I would have probably yelled maybe like an explosive word. I may have stomped my foot. I would have gotten really upset inside and uptight, and which is fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I have realized that that's not hurting anyone really but myself. And I am so much more mindful about my nervous system now because of my mom's high stress lifestyle. And now, I don't know if that is played into her disease, but, I'm seeing that as a potential factor. And I just want to make sure that I am caring for myself. So I have really started to embody these things to help myself out here. There's no need to get upset that I dropped the blueberries. I just dropped the blueberries.
Yeah.
I think a lot about what one of my teachers says, and he says, you're born, you get 80 or 90 years if you're lucky, and then you die. What do you want to be spending that time doing? And I feel like it really boils down to the tiny moments like dropping the blueberries or being mad at the car in front of you because they're not going 5 miles over the speed limit like you want them to go. And taking all of these practices that I studied and now the dementia journey and applying it to everyday moments, it's like changing my life. Absolutely, 100%. Like I feel very different than I used to.
I love that for you.
Thank you.
How do we help others tap into that? If you could give our listener any kind of tips or advice on some things that they can do when everything's kind of just fallen apart and the normal self-care kind of stuff, there's just no time for it, truly no time for it. What ideas do you have for helping them stay calm, see that perspective, realize that there can still be gratitude there and still make sure they're taking care of their nervous system? Do you have any advice for that?
Sure, absolutely. One of the best things that all of us can do is to just get to know our own mind. And what that means is starting to tune in and hear what that nonstop chatter is saying all day, every day. And it sounds so simplistic, but it's pretty intense to start to notice how much we're not okay, how often we're not okay when life is happening, not even the big things, like dropping the blueberries or dropping some ketchup on your pants at work. And then that just wrecks your whole day. And hearing what you say in that moment is absolutely crucial to your well-being. Do you say, I cannot believe I did that. I just dropped the ketchup. I just dropped the blueberries. Now, great. My smoothie isn't going to be as cold as I wanted it to be. Now I'm going to have to clean this up. And then I have the podcast to do. What am I going to do? It is so crucial to notice what's going on before you try to change anything or make any adjustments. Just hear what that is doing, because what we do as human beings is like we live our life reacting and responding to that voice. We live our lives hearing our thought pop up, which is, again, just based on our past experiences, right? Our supercomputer here, it pops up a thing and it gets mad, gets super PO'd about the blueberries, right? And then we can see like, oh, wow, man, I was pretty mean to myself just then. And wow, dropping the blueberries yesterday before Marianne's podcast, I let that wreck my day. And then from that place, that's where we can start to make some sort of change. And we can do that by just starting to reframe that voice a little bit. Were the blueberries that big of a deal? I don't think so. Let's just go on with the day. And it takes time. It takes practice. Like, I've been doing this for over 10 years.
Yes.
It's starting to embody these things. So not only is it important to just first get to know yourself before you make these changes, but it's also important to be easy on yourself. You don't sit down, if you're trying to learn how to play the piano, you don't sit down and immediately play Beethoven. You have to learn scales. You have to practice drills. And so my drills are sitting quietly in meditation for 5 minutes a morning. My drills are deep breathing in the line at the grocery store when I feel like anxiety about something. I go to yoga classes when I can. I listen to Dharma talks in the way when I'm driving or when I'm traveling for work, things like that. Those are small things that we can do. And I think it's very easy when you identify like this big meltdown that's happening and you realize I got to change my life. I got to change my life. But like when we start from that big, huge place, it feels impossible. And so that's why I always suggest and I learned this from my teacher, Michael Singer, just start small. Just start to notice these tiny things that we do all day, every day.
Yeah. That
impact the rest of our day. It's just kind of wild how we let small things in life just sort of take over. And we start to go down this, wild thought train about the dropped blueberries or the driver in front of us. And those places are really the perfect opportunity to start to notice and witness. And that then you see when the big stuff happens, you react to it differently.
Yeah. You learn some skills to self-regulate a little bit differently. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Similarly, what if you could give some advice about asking for help, accepting help? It's hard for some people, especially people like you, people like me, a lot of people listening that are used to being the doer, the leader, the fixer. How do you set that aside?
So that's another place where I realized how impactful that drive for independence was in terms of my mom accepting help and this dementia journey. So it started with her needing assistance with dressing, and the resistance was so strong. Then just over the years, not wanting to stop driving, not wanting us to help her with preparing food or really doing anything. And I realized, I better start now learning how to accept help, because when my mom, with my mom, she's at this point where even 10 years ago, where the brain is just kind of running on default, right? So she's just reacting based on how she's always reacted. And she doesn't really have the cognitive space to change those things. So with that knowledge in mind, I realized wow, well, if I ever have dementia or some sort of neurological issue going on, I would like my default to be accepting help. So what I started doing, might sound a little cheesy, but every time I go into stores now, if someone asks me if I need help finding something, I always say yes. Always. trying to retrain myself. You know, I have trained myself for 46 years now to be a leader, to be independent and not need anyone's help, you know, so it's going to take some time. But I have noticed that, you know, over the past few years of just practicing accepting help in small ways or with family members, probably a little bit harder than the person at the store, right?
Yeah.
Hey, can I help you with this? Well, you know, the thought goes, well, are they going to do it right?
Yeah.
Are they going to do it like I would do
Yes.
it, you know? But again, going back to that awareness of my thoughts, awareness of that voice, that's where it started. I noticed it. So once I noticed it, I had a decision to make. Am I going to believe it or not? And so I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter if they do it right or wrong or whatever that even means. Yes, I will accept the help. And yeah, it feels a little uncomfortable, unnatural at first, but you know, I want that to be my default. I want my default to be accepting. Now, this doesn't mean that I've stopped giving help. I give help to so many people in my life and I love it. And I love helping others and all of that. But I've also realized that the flip side of that is I need to also help myself. And that is through accepting the assistance of others. And it's just an ongoing practice, if you will, you know, I try. And most of the time I accept help and sometimes I don't. But I don't think with something like this, we can kind of rationale our way into believing to accept help.
Yeah.
I just think it takes like actual practice.
It's practice. The word you said is practice. And it's the same as the other things we were talking about. It is ongoing practice and you'll just get better and better.
But it's fun. Like this is life and this is your life. And like, even if you're surrounded by such a beautiful community of people and family members, ultimately we are alone. You're in there, right? You're living in this body. I'm living in this body, right? And so I would personally just like this to be a nice place to live, you know? Mm-hmm. And I don't want to, and it's such a huge motivation to me. I watched my mom, who now has dementia, really struggle her whole life with her internal environment. She was always very stressed, always very like intense. And I was taking on those same traits. And I don't know, one day recently, I was like, you know, I don't want to live like that anymore. I want it to feel good in here, no matter what is happening. And you know, I don't mean good like I don't experience sadness or grief or any of the range of emotions. I just mean good in terms of feeling like I can handle whatever is happening. And so one of the things that I do remind myself, and this could be another takeaway for anyone listening, is I always remind myself that I can handle this. I say it to myself all the time. When my mom has some sort of accident, and we're trying to rush out of the house and everything takes longer and it's frustrating. And then I spilled the blueberries and then my cat threw up. And then we can all relate. There are days like that, right?
Yeah.
I just literally will say, okay, well, I can handle this.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, most of us live life from a place of not being able to handle this, you know? And this isn't like false positivity. This is understanding that I have been through things that were uncomfortable. I'm going to go through more things that were uncomfortable, but you know what? I handled it then. I can handle it now. And, you know, just to remind myself of that, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that critical piece is looking backwards for a minute and reminding yourself that everything you've been through, whatever that is, whatever that looks like for a person, you made it through. So
Yes,
of course
exactly.
You're going to make it through this stuff too. So yeah, it's a good reminder though. I want to switch gears just for a minute before we start wrapping up, but I'm curious, you recently learned how to be a death doula.
Yes.
And so I'm curious how that has, or if that has shifted your thoughts at all or helped at all in this space of caring for mom. What changes came out of that, if any?
One of my biggest motivations for doing that is I wanted to understand the dying process better. So I'm best prepared because it's going to happen to my mom and everyone I know and love. That's just the reality of living. And so I went to Alua Arthur's Going with Grace school. And I think what it gave me, honestly, was more peace in knowing that It's okay that my mom is going to die because I know logically now that these are the things that are going to happen to the body. This is what's going on. And maybe it's just how I am, but to me, knowledge is so empowering. So when I can learn about these actual processes, it eliminates some of the fear from it, and I think that's why a lot of people are scared of the end of life, because it's not something that we give much time or attention to. Yeah. It's not something that we ponder, because I think a lot of people are worried about, if I ponder it, I'm going to bring it upon myself, right?
Yes.
But how many times have we pondered quitting our job? How many times have we pondered winning the lottery? How many times have you see where I'm going with this, right?
Great
and that's I thought about this point while I was on retreat, because I was like, wow, this really isn't scary. It's not. And that's the thing, so many of us have been or are afraid of planning for the end, when in reality, it's the second biggest thing that happens in our life.
Yeah.
Why not think about things like for instance, I have a death playlist for myself, and it's not sad songs. It's not, it's songs that make my insides light up, that I want to hear one last time. And so I have told my best friends about it, my husband, my family, they all know about this playlist. I'm a music nerd, so I need to hear these songs, okay? But it is something that, the more I ponder it for myself and do little things like this, I feel like it just takes the mystique out of it a little bit. And it's, like I said, eliminating that fear. And, it's making me realize that it is what we make of it. And this time, learning about this and studying it, I think it's really preparing me just for myself, obviously, but it's preparing me for my mom. And that's not to say I'm not going to be sad. I am going to hit grief in a way that I probably have never experienced in my whole life.
Yeah.
But I know I'll remain tethered to the here and now. Yeah. I know I won't get lost in that grief with her.
It's great work. I've talked to other people, and I think it takes special people to help others kind of shepherd through some of those feelings and open up some of those topics of conversation. Because I do think for most of us, it's difficult. And I remember somebody said to me, another person that has trained to be a death doula and does that for a job. And she said, it's just something we don't talk about. We don't grow up talking about it. No, you're not never having conversations about it. And we just need to start changing that so it becomes more commonplace. And
really,
that made sense to me, because I don't think we talk about it.
We don't. And so a huge catalyst for me was when my mother-in-law passed away, and I served as her doula before I knew what that was. I sat bedside with her for a majority of the time. I played her singing bowls. I read to her. I played her music, all of these things. And I felt very at home there. I felt very natural in that process. But through that process, I realized wow, nobody talks about this at all.
Yeah.
And that made decision-making and planning and all of that so much more difficult.
Yes.
And you'll notice it when your own family goes through it, is that the fear and the inability to talk about it really hinders so much of that. And, I want my mom's end of life and celebration of her life to be special. I don't want to be scrambling.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid of it, and that's where I'm trying to get my stepdad on board right now. And that it is difficult, because I'm watching someone who has decades on me, 20, 30 more years of not thinking about it.
Yes.
And I'm trying to get him on board. And
that's hard.
It is. It's definitely difficult for him. And I'm just trying to be as gentle as possible.
Well, and I would also say there's another element of him being that much older, that it will make him face his own death. And that makes it even that much harder. Not that, obviously we're all going to die, but when you're that much older, it just feels a little more real, right?
I'm sure. Yeah. And I think it's important to start talking about it younger, because what it seems like to me in studying a lot about end of life and other people's scenarios and applying my own families' lives and friends' lives is that I think a lot of people are scared of the end because of how they live life. So I think that there can be a lot of fear from people like, I didn't do enough. So I think if we could start pondering this a little bit more for our own well-being, it may motivate us to live in a different way.
Yeah.
It may motivate us to be nicer to that person at the grocery store. It may motivate us to be nicer to ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we, like you said, none of us are getting out of here alive, right? So why not ponder this so that we can live a better life now?
A good book, you made me think of a book that I've done with a group for a book club, is A Year to Live by Stephen Levine. I'm going to say it wrong.
Look that up.
You should. And it's deep. It's a small book, but it's really deep, and it really makes you think about, it walks you through exercises. I mean, the book is kind of laid out to happen over a year, but you can do it in a shorter period of time. And it's really made to have you reflect on so many things, but also think about, like, if this was your last year, how would you want to live it? And then obviously you can take that forward into the rest of your life, but it's a good book. It really makes you think, and it puts a lot of things in perspective. So yeah, I do suggest that for people thinking about it. I just want to give you an opportunity. If we have to leave a message, a single message for our listener, what would it be?
Go easy on yourself.
That's a good one.
Go easy on yourself. Life is too short, and you are the one that has to deal with you.
Yeah.
Like, go easy on yourself. Tend to yourself. Go easy on yourself. That is the thing that I feel like I wish I had done a decade ago. I put so much pressure on myself, and I know my mom wouldn't have wanted me to go through that either. And now I feel like going easy on myself is like my main focus all day, every day. I just want to make sure that I am okay, you know?
Yeah, I love that. People have to get self-aware to then be able to inform themselves on how to go easy on themselves and where that's, they're getting kind of hung up. But what a beautiful thought.
I highly recommend, as you mentioned in the beginning, the book, The Untethered Soul, in terms of getting to know that nonstop chatter in your mind.
Yeah.
It is such a great introductory book to that and starting a relationship with yourself.
Love that. Well, I will put all of your links out there for people. I know that we have your website, but you're also pretty prevalent, pretty active on Instagram, right? So is that the best place for people to find you?
It is. Yeah. And I'm actually in the process of launching my website for my meditation and mindfulness work, as well as an Instagram for that as well. So yeah, you can find that at Alzheimer's Awakening on Instagram. And I do like to help people there.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time and talking with us today about your experience, and hope Mom hangs in there and you guys continue to have some great experiences.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I appreciate your time too.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Message in the Middle. I hope you found something in this conversation that reminded you that you're not alone, and that midlife isn't about winding down. It's about waking up. You're not done. You're just becoming. If this episode speaks to you at all, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And if you're enjoying the show, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave a review. It really helps other women find this community and this podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself.